Today, Rinpoche gave a very thorough explanation of how the afflictions arise, using Jayan Sheba's outline to elucidate this topic.
Odela saji jimar samba jama monto samba jibi telo lu sewa taba dribi lange ne tela poba saji jije ta dombo dela taba ngozo te jibi taji je te jibi tadela donga de gunyu gun samba dan yala junyi gun samba ni je donga de gunyu gun samba dela du den de ji toma son be goba dan donga gomba ngoni donga gomba ngodela donga je donga chu donga son what does Savaji? That Kunjugun Sambat Marve, Kunjugun Sambatala, never Kunjugun Sambatala, then Yomobachi to Lesu, Chibo, the Chivachu, Chivalem, Sumarve, Chibo, Chivalem, Sunje,
Lesser,
that Dombo,
Je,
and Chibo, Chivalem, Surua, Chivalem, Suji, that Dombo. What the Dungan Gunugan somewhat the Marberva, never Gunugan somewhatla, never Gunugan somewhatimba.
the Nyomo Inseni, Rimba, Jew, Nieme.
Oh, Nyomobi or Nyomobi Niemi, Jew, what in Jitba.
Let's hope.
Jitimba,
Let's hope.
Jichi. That the know what they never Gunugan somewhatla, son. Nyomoji to les will be chipo Joalem to Leje, Tambo Nyomo Mozua, Tambo what the Nyomoji to the Nyomo Mozua, Cheta Jimba, Nyomobi, Nyomobi, Yemijero, Yemijero, what the Jetat and then what the Tat Nyomobi Nyomoba Mozua, Hotela, what the Nyomoba Mozua, the Latin Kashugareta.
Rinpoche did school the mumble to China. So once again, we're looking at Lama Tsongkhapa's great treatise on the stage of the path to enlightenment, and specifically in the section with the major heading, Training the Mind in the Stage of the Path Shared in Common with Beings of Medium Capacity. So when we look at that as a whole, we can break that down into four categories. The first category being the mental training. The second category is the measure of the determination to be free, or the measure of one's renunciation. A third category of dispelling misconceptions, and then a fourth category of ascertaining the nature of the path leading to liberation. So when we begin looking at that first category of the mental training, we find that there are two categories there. First, identifying the mind intent on liberation, and then the method for actually achieving that mind intent on liberation, the method for developing renunciation. So when we go to that second category, the method for developing the mind intent on liberation, we find that there are two categories there. First category is reflection on suffering and its origin, and then the second category is reflection from the viewpoint of the 12 links of dependent origination. So if we look at that first category, reflection from the viewpoint of suffering and its origin, we begin with reflection on suffering and its origin, and then it's explained in two parts. Reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, and then the reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of its origin. The first category there, which is reflection on the truth of suffering, the faults of cyclic existence, we find two categories. The first category is showing the significance of the Buddha's asserting the truth of suffering as the first of the Four Noble Truths. And then the second category is the actual meditation on suffering. So when we get to that actual meditation on suffering, we find this reflection on the general sufferings of cyclic existence and the specific sufferings of cyclic existence, and we find the various sufferings enumerated. So we find the 8 types of suffering, we find the 6 types of suffering, we find the 3 types of suffering. So then, once we finish that section, then we get to that next category that next category, which is reflection on suffering in terms of its origin. So once we go through the various types of suffering and the enumeration and so forth, then we get to reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of its origin. So in that section, we find that there are 3 categories. First category is how the afflictions arise. The second category is how you accumulate karma. And then the third category is how you die and are reborn. So the first category, how the afflictions arise, there are 4 categories. First, identifying the afflictions, or the identification of the afflictions, and then the order in which the afflictions arise, so the order that the afflictions develop, arise or develop. The third category of the causes of the afflictions, and then the fourth category, the faults of the afflictions. Those are the 4 categories of the first category under the major heading, reflection on process of cyclic existence in terms of its origin. Dixon, near the Ewa Geshe Lharampa.
Oh, that never good. Never good. What could you sample a song? You must be cheap to less of it to chipper water.
Lesser.
Nisanji song, Tumble a jet.
Lesser.
No moon was one. Take that cheese about your moon. No more be junior, maybe near me. What 0?
Lesser.
That tumble and no more sheets and Susan. What does the shades are water?
Lesser.
No, send you my Jewish religion, send you more. She is 10 years.
Lesser.
No more in a Jew or the child control, Naje, no more judge Madiba, Tazon, Daminga.
Lesser.
Tanjita Tata Luta. Chudu choosing Luta the Nga. What the town at the race?
Lesser.
What does Rose change?
Lesser.
That no more be Joe true. What the rules magicians about where?
Lesser.
No more be Joe. Do the true.
Lesser.
Then Meba, Donzin,
Lesser.
Sheba Comba, Hila Shebas.
Lesser.
What you what done? Nibba less of shit in the middle.
Okay. So, looking then at the outline, again, we have this reflection on the process of cyclic existence in terms of its origin. Then we have 3 major headings: how the afflictions arise, how you accumulate karma, how you die and are reborn. Under the category of how the afflictions arise, we have first the general definition of affliction, or the identification of the afflictions, but it's really the definition of defining the afflictions. So this is the first category. Second category, order in which the afflictions arise. Third category, causes of the afflictions. And then the fourth category, the faults of the afflictions. So when we get to that first category, which is the definition of the afflictions, or the identification of the afflictions, we find the general definitions of affliction, and then we find specific definitions of specific afflictions. So the general definition of affliction is a phenomena which, when it arises, is disturbing in character, and that through arising disturbs the mind stream. So this is the definition, the general definition of an affliction. And then we have the 10 specific definitions, and there are 5 afflictions that are defined that are considered viewless, and then there are 5 afflictions that are view. So the first 5 that are viewless are attachment, hostility, pride, ignorance, and doubt. And then the 5 that are view, afflictions that are view, are the reifying view of the perishing aggregates, an extremist view, a belief in the supremacy of wrong views, a belief in the supremacy of ethics and religious discipline, and then wrong view. So those are the 5 viewless and 5 view afflictions, and then in this section they're defined. And that's the section that deals with specific definitions, whereas before that it's just general definition of affliction. Diksun. The Namgyal Monastery. Then the next category, I forgot a whole bunch, apologize for that. The next category, the causes of the afflictions, we find that there are 6 categories. First, the basis. Second is the object. Third, social context. Fourth is explanation. Fifth, habituation. And then 6 is attention. So these are the 6 causes of the afflictions, and then we get into the next category, which is the faults of the afflictions, or what is wrong with the afflictions, and then after that, the next category is that second major heading in this section, how you thereby accumulate karma. So that's where Rinpoche got to in the outline, and that's where we'll begin. So 303 is where the how you thereby accumulate karma is. The late up.
Yeah. Ta nyomoba ji chuda la ane jiro nyomo ngozwa. And Jetta G is about Yomobi, Junobo Yemi.
That's it.
Or the Jeje. That Yomoba was on Hotela, and then Jajibe what they tell us Haji Sun Jine, Sumba del Jajagua. That Yomo, Quandrubi Judah led on Yomoba or they non 2 Yomores. And then Yomo Mena late on the Yoba Inaya, call Jolan to Mare, Dajumbatsu, Jula. Lema we the quality Jolan to Mares, Jusen Garazana, and then Legislation Yomupon Seba, and then quality Jolan to Mares. Now then, the CBC Nagi Legend Penny Mind, Legislation Session Rose, none they glue down Marba, or the CBC Nagi Dajumba Lema we the Sibal Quad Jolan to Mares. CBC Nagi Legend Penny Mind, Legislation Session Rose, Legislation Yomupons in Bezer, Dajumba in Bezer, Dajumba Yomupon Gurua. What is on the matter? CBC Nagi Legend Penny Mind, the Legislation Session Rose.
So the Ewatambo, okay. So Rinpoche is now going back, so I apologize. We're going back to 298. And we're going to look at this section through Jayan Sheva's commentary and the different categories, just to just solidify understanding. So, so we have these 3 categories: how the afflictions arise, second, how you thereby accumulate karma, how you die and are reborn. So we have now the major heading, how the afflictions arise, and Jayan Sheba breaks this into 3 categories. So this section he breaks down into actually 3. So we were saying how the afflictions arise, and then 4 categories identifying the afflictions, the order in which they arise, the causes of the afflictions, and the faults of the afflictions. But if we begin at the top section, where it's just how the afflictions arise, Jayan Sheba says that fits into 3 parts. So the first part is that the afflictions are the root of cyclic existence, because they are the cooperating condition that's necessary to be present for the birth into cyclic existence. Even if, so if we compare the 2, karma and the afflictions, the afflictions really are the primary, are the root of cyclic existence. So that point is made in Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, where it says the karma of one who has transcended craving for existence lacks the potency to project another birth because its cooperating conditions are gone. So there are beings such as a foe destroyer who have, since beginningless time, accumulated karma. So they have karma that would give rise to a rebirth into cyclic existence. But they no longer have the afflictions within their continuum. They've gotten rid of those completely. So because the afflictions serve as a cooperating condition that's necessary to be present for the arisal of a birth in cyclic existence, if they're not present, one cannot be born there. So it's the case of a foe destroyer still having that karma to project another rebirth in cyclic existence, but no longer having the afflictions. So the way you would state this is that a foe destroyer doesn't have another rebirth. Here when we look at the commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, it says the karma of one who has transcended craving. So a foe destroyer, the subject, a foe destroyer, doesn't have another rebirth because the karma they have, it says, lacks the potency to project another birth because the cooperating conditions are gone. So a foe destroyer cannot have another rebirth because the potency isn't there, because the cooperating conditions, which are the afflictions, aren't present. So therefore, there cannot be another birth. So this first category is showing how the root of cyclic existence, the primary among the two karma and afflictions is afflictions. And then Dharmakirti goes on to say, because the aggregates will rise again if you have craving. So if the cooperating condition is there, then there can be that arisal. But if it's not present, there can't be. So Jayan Sheva says the first point Lama Tsongkhapa makes is this first category showing why afflictions are primary.
What nyomo could you do is on nyomo bongure, nyomo bombala, nyomo nyabatan, and no nyomo kebaji was nearby Marba. Jaji wrote the neighbor, Talanicham theatre.
That's so. So the second category is that if one wants to abandon the afflictions, it's necessary to apply a remedy. It's necessary to apply an antidote. So the need for a remedy is the second category, and Lama Tsongkhapa then next gets into that, the importance of relying on a remedy, relying on a remedy for the afflictions. So that's category number 2.
What the Kurun to let the J or the Lanicham Sajil that Redo Nyomo Chetaji Ziba Nyomo be Jo Nyomo be Yemis, what the Jit Renwa.
So the next category is knowledge about the afflictions, becoming knowledgeable about the afflictions. So this is category number 3. And in that, there are 4 categories, and they are just the categories that we find in the Lamrim Chenmo's outline. So the category number 3 is all of those categories, identifying the afflictions, the order in which they arise, the causes of the afflictions, and the faults of the afflictions.
Senju Majo Shibi, Shelejin Senju Yomobi Senis, Suzu Senil Datan Yomuchundua, Lecha Kondru Naje, Yomoje Mariba, Tazon, Taminga, Jita Tata Luta, Tawa Chunzin, Tudin Tuju Chunzin, Luta Tanga Tawa, Tawa Res, Mariba, Jusen Tanology, Yomoy Tawa, Namad Tamin, Ruin
So the first category, identifying the afflictions, we find the general definition of affliction from a Sangha's Compendium of Knowledge. An affliction is defined as a phenomena that when it arises is disturbing in character, and that through arising disturbs the mind stream. Thus, when it's produced, it disturbs the mind stream. It's added by Tsongkhapa. Then we have the specific definitions of the 10 afflictions. We have the view of afflictions that are not view, attachment, hostility, pride, ignorance, and doubt. And then the afflictions that are view, reifying view of the perishing aggregates, an extremist view, a belief in the supremacy of wrong views, a belief in the supremacy of ethics and religious discipline, and wrong view. Are the 5 viewed afflictions. And they are view because based upon that the others arise.
Donjin Sheba Kumba, Yela Sheba was what the Yomo Jul Trujagadua. Then said what the Yomo Balani Teresa Marbe, Yomo Bacha, Yomo Bacha to what Yomo Juris, Yomo Bacha, Tandocha Kondri Bacha, what the Yomo Bacha Latene, and Yomo Chongujuta. Then the Yomo Balani to us. Mebane and Yomo don't be in house. Yomo be made by the Carasana. And the Shag maybe he don't want Marva. Conjugan maybe he don't want. He don't want to all attend the Shagin with it. He don't want to all the country checkers. Your motor don't be in how then, and your motor Jim with it. And then me pass at him, but it. That those inside the Chibutama Maimbi, Chibutama Maimbi Drug and be just lapa. Chibutama Maimbi Drug and be Nandul, the new Moja Kachamoshia or things some don't say Sheba and Chuluba Sheba. Chuluba Sheba, new Moja Guerra. And the Combane, Joan Homa Maban, Toma Mabananga, the Chak Hundreds and Yomal Conduro, Combat Yodra, Compi Wonki. And then your mojo war, Marba, the shall combi on the charging water, Kondo combi on Kondo chain water, Naja combi on Naja chain waters, Comba settings, Marba. He la Shebas and a tat and a cotter. And your mojo a lot. Chaji bomba mai ta yun ni wa ne ba chi mai ye le nyomo jun sawa is nyomo ba che wala nyomo bomba mai ba chu ko re nyomo bon sa na nyomo che ma res chaji bomba mai ta yun ni wa ne ba an nyomo de che ya ge yu de wa ne so na nyomo che mo res yun ni wa ne ba ta ne chi mai ye ma re ba chi mai be ye and you don't want him to send Musan down Valentine, the chat Jungre. You don't want to send Musan down Kondo Jungre. Then I in your motor that the Mabel Mene, Tuji may be gelatin, your Mojungres, your movie Jutru, but there is.
So now we move on to the Rinpoche.
Nyomo ji rinpa de la de ba. Rinpa la so.
Nipa, yeah.
Nyomo be ji rinpa de ba ji da da. Ka da da su su do ba ina. An ne ka de o ke de ka so re. O de bo la men da de ro ba zi ba la de ne o de ran la cha jen la da cha da la so lo che ng res. Ji da de ma ri ba jin do ba ina. An ma ri ba khu ji da res. Ji da la de ne Rashula Chabatan, Jenshula Dawatan, and no what they Najet and Tazula about the Sukachimuris.
Okay.
Rimbat de Marve. Yeah.
Okay. Jita Tata Maripa.
Jita Tata
The Nipa, the Dawa Ni, the cheek, the Jita dan Maripa Chipa Yimba, then the
Jita da Mariba jeans against Jita Tadins again.
Yeah, ni, the
Jita da Mariba, Yomuji, but the Jita da Mariba Susun de Batanas, but not Taba Drubala Taba Dubala. Maba Jonze Boba na Pode, Tabinello Masiwana, Tela Drudun Zibi Luchawatar, Pombi Nelu Masiwa, GB Maribi, Mabatiba Pombo, Dadu Truba Chigres, Pombo Dadu Ruanzi Danzin Chingures, Tela Tene, Nyomotoma Chingures, Sini Jidun Dobatana. And the Jita Maribares, Jita Latene, Dochato Kuruta, Nomus Hamachungures, Marba.
That's it.
The Lorichum.
So then the order in which the afflictions arise is the second section there. And we just read a little out of the Lamrim Chenmo. So this is showing how they arise. So first there's this view of the perishing aggregates. It apprehends an I, it apprehends a self. And then from that apprehension, there's a distinction made between self and other. And then one becomes attached to what one desires, and one becomes angry at what one finds unpleasant or unattractive. Desirous is probably what one finds desirous, what one finds attractive. What one finds unattractive brings about anger or hostility. It says one way to look at this is to consider ignorance as distinct from the view of the perishing aggregates. For example, when twilight falls on a coiled rope, its status as a rope will be unclear, and someone may imagine that it's a stakes. Similarly, according to this view, the misapprehension of the aggregates as a self arises due to the darkness of ignorance, which prevents clarity about how the aggregates exist. The other afflictions then develop from the misapprehension. On the other hand, if you hold that ignorance and the view of the perishing aggregates are identical, then the view of the perishing aggregates is itself the root of the afflictions. So there are two ways to look at it. Lama Tsongkhapa presents here, and it says when the view of the perishing aggregates apprehends a self, discrimination arises between self and other. And then once you make that distinction, you become attached to what is associated with yourself and hostile towards what pertains to others. But as Rinpoche said, when you find something that is attractive, you become attached to that when that distinction is made. When you find something that is unattractive, you have an angry feeling that can arise. So it shows you how the afflictions arise. So the events or the occurrences that take place for their arisal. This is what is gone over in this section. And then we find the quote from Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition. Once there is a self, there's an idea of another. On behalf of self and other, there is attachment and hostility. All the faults come about in association with these. So these are the points that are made here. Just going back to the first points that are made about how the afflictions arise and how the afflictions are the cooperating conditions. If you have this cooperating condition present, then you have that potential for the attachment to the desirous and this anger towards that which is not attractive. Just making a point about that prior. So the third category is the causes of the afflictions. And Rinpoche said we'll give a little bit of an explanation, a small presentation of that. The sixfold as presented in the Bodhisattva levels. So the first cause of the afflictions is basis. So basis refers to the latent proclivity for the affliction. So this is referring to the imprints. If we have imprints of attachment, then this can arise. If we have imprints of anger or hatred, then this arises. So this is the basis. The basis is the imprint there of it. So that's number one. Second is object. Object refers to the appearance of objects conducive to the arising of an affliction. So the object of observation, if it's something that's attractive, then one becomes attached. So that becomes conducive to attachment, that object. If one sees something that's not attractive, then one can become angry. So that object is conducive to the arisal of that anger. So first you have the imprint of that, and then you have the object. The third is social context. It says refers to the influence of bad friends and foolish people. So if you have bad friends or bad associates and you talk a lot, and you have this propensity to engage in negativity from that social, Rinpoche is kind of saying the talking itself. So from that social interaction, you have the arisal of these afflictions, and it's being influenced by negative people, by bad people. And then number 4 refers to listening to wrong teachings. So hearing a wrong teaching can bring about this arisal. And then habituation refers to the process of being accustomed to the past afflictions. Since beginningless time, we've become familiar with these afflictions. And if we have this familiarization with attachment, with this habituation, this familiarization with attachment, then we will have the arisal of attachment. If we have this familiarization with familiarization with anger, then that will arise. So it's the same word again that we use. The Tibetan word is the word for meditation. So it's like we've meditated on, because the word that in Tibetan, gom, really means familiarization. We translate it as meditation, but it means to familiarize yourself with something, whether it's an object of observation or it's an analytical. So that's as a translator's note. That word in Tibetan, gom, can be translated either way as meditation or familiarization. So we've meditated on, we familiarized ourselves since beginningless time with anger and attachment. And then number 6 is attention. It says refers to incorrect attention that projects pleasantness onto what has an unpleasant character, conceives an impermanent thing to be permanent, and the like, the 4 erroneous conceptions that mistakenly consider that things are actually impermanent, painful, impure, and lacking a self to be permanent, pleasant, pure, possessed of a self. So this incorrect attention is referring to improper mental conduct. It's the improper mental conduct that's arriving at a mistaken idea. And here it's perceiving that which is unpleasant to be pleasant, and so on and so forth. So if 3 things have to be present in order for an affliction to arise. First, one has to have not already abandoned that affliction. So that's the first one. The second category is one has to be close to that thing which is conducive to the arisal of the affliction. So object in number 2. When we look at these 6 causes of the afflictions, that's that thing that is conducive to that arisal, that object that is attractive that makes you attached, that is not attractive that makes you angry. And number 3, improper mental conduct is number 3. So there has to be this improper mental conduct present in order for the affliction to rise. So if these 3 are present, then an affliction can arise. So we have those 3 points that are made, which are different than the causes, 6-fold presentation of causes of afflictions. But Rinpoche interwove it into the attention part because we have that object and we have that improper mental conduct presented in those 3 in a similar way. Digsum.
Jinrosha Narua Lari Jumbo Wate, Peijan and Neja, Sonju Sangarua, when Neja Sonju Sanga Tangulma, Chetaji, Yomoji, Rembatanma, Yaja Taji Chinamara.
Okay, so Rinpoche would like to go over the second category, the order in which the afflictions arise, in more detail by looking at the Lamrim Chenmo specifically and going through it.
What was Angat?
So number 300, page 300.
What did that number? Never Jetaji in Banes, Tanyamuchi in Badamara, Yamu was one, Yamu Jetaji in Ba, Yamu was on the Ta, Yamu Connecticut and the Chigres, G in Banes, Jita Mariba, Susu. Dobatana, Jita Mariba Nite, Kaka is against you. Susan Dobatana, Pana, Taba Duba Lama Junzi Bode, Tabi Nelu Masivana, the Drudu and Zimbi Luja Taras, that Taba Drud Zibiluja, Taba Druma Ibala Drud Zibiluja Najin, Ne Pumbu the Dadu Zimbi. Zimbabwe, Danziris, Telenumotus Jongres, the Sosundeva Chena, Tanjita Chelas, Telenumojana Joes, the Chidun Dobatan, Jida, the Maribani, Chidun Chi in Dobaina, Jidani Maribaos, Jidani Maribares, Jidani Maribajane, and Jida Latene, and Nomojada Jongres. They are Jidi Daduzua, Jidi Daduzua Nas, Jidi Daduzua, Jidi Daduzua Narajan, Suso Rizo, Chubashelas, Techine, Rankishula Chabatan, Genjishula, Shedawan, Dala Mine, Kimbayan Jelas, Da Tenila, Tachidu, Tenji, Dado, Tawa Sudan, Tetanji, Shebangamba, Chudin, Turin, Joe, Tejindo, Dame Dembi, Dembatan, Dembi, Lende Dembi, Demba Jetan, Control Subata, Medunia, Luta Jongres, Yana Theatre, Tetabu, Yemetan, Ina Minato, Teton Jetes, Tanading London Marbe.
That's
What and my what they Tesongo, Yomoji, but Marbe.
That's
Yomoji, Jeda, the Mariba, Susan de Batana, Taba Druma, Druds in Veloce Batara, and the Pomodad drones in Bajeres, Te Joshua Latene, and then the child on Honduran, Yomoka Chongres. The Nijidu de Batana, Jidani Maribares, Jida Joshua Latene, the child on Honduran, Yomoka Chongres. Yomojana, Malinjisula, Talishon, Luton, Dan and the Yutu Dojene, Nanjuba Idan Gubashis, Omanju Magil, Tataba Yure. Yomoba Kangalo, Jita Latin Shonyoris, Yomoba Kangalo, Jita Joshua Latene, Shonyoris, Yomojana, Malinjisula, Talishon, or the Tutor Agumar, Sanji Trubak Tazure. Yomojana, Malinjisula, Talishon, Luton, Dan and the Yutu Dojene, Nanjuba Idan Gubashis. Jida Geshe Lharampa, the Chakondola Subinyomo, but so much is. They use and Tomo, Jida Geshe, Dame Tugures, Nanjuba Dan Gubashes, Dame Gongina, and that was entered the neighborhood of Marba. Nanjuba Dan Gubashes, Umanju, the Tazure, what does it water?
So we'll read through this. The order in which the afflictions arise. One way to look at this is to consider ignorance as distinct from the view of the perishing aggregates. For example, when twilight falls on a coiled rope, its status as a rope will be unclear, and someone may imagine that it is a snake. Similarly, according to this view, the misapprehension of aggregates as a self arises due to the darkness of ignorance, which prevents clarity about how the aggregates exist. The other afflictions then develop from this misapprehension. So this is the first way of looking at it as the two are distinct, ignorance and the view of the perishing aggregates, so showing how these arise. But if you look at it as if they are the same, it says, on the other hand, if you hold that ignorance and the view of the perishing aggregates are identical, then the view of the perishing aggregates is itself the root of the afflictions. When the view of the perishing aggregates apprehends a self, discrimination arises between self and other. Once you have made that distinction, you become attached to what is associated with yourself and hostile toward that which pertains to others. As you observe the self, your mind also becomes inflated. You develop a belief that this very self is either eternal or subject to annihilation. You come to believe in the supremacy of a view of the self and the like. You also come to believe in the supremacy of detrimental practices associated with such views. Similarly, you develop the wrong view that denies the existence of things such as the teacher who taught selflessness and that which he taught. karma and its effects, the four truths, the three jewels, and so forth. Or else you become doubtful as to whether such things exist or are real. Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition says. So we find in this Dharmakirti's text the kind of summary of the points that are made. Once there is a self, there is an idea of other. On behalf of self and other, there is attachment and hostility. All the faults come about in association with these. So just as seeing a coiled rope in a room and thinking it's a snake is a misapprehension, believing that when one apprehends the aggregates that there is this self is the same. So because this misapprehension of the aggregates and so forth, one believes there's this self. So this is how it occurs, and then based on this belief, then the afflictions can arise, and the attachment can arise, and hostility can arise. And we find this point made in the Chandrakirti's commentary on the root wisdom text, the entrance to the middle way, in the 6th chapter, where it says that the yogis see there is no self, so therefore they see no. I can at the break get this. It's in the 6th chapter, and I had this tabbed off. Let me just see if.
So
Rinpoche is saying that what is presented here is very similar to what is presented in Chandrakirti's
ane dajen cha tang zi tang ten rang la cha pa tang yen la tang yu kong tu che yung kores te tang zhe yu kone ane nyo mo pa tang tsama che yung kores te ta ten ne nyo mo ne da yu na ne yen tu she dajen cha tang zi tang ten kansa nga da tu rupa zeba la ten zebe ju sheba la ten ne da la chaba che yung kore yen la she tang che yung kores da jen cha tang zi tang ten tata tang ne yung zhe le nyeba tang jen yung wang ju rus ne te tang zhe wala ji ta la ten ne nyong ma pa tang ji yung kores nyong mo ju na ma le ji so la ta le shong wang du yu tong dan di yu tu si nen ju ba yi da nung ku ba wa tu sun rabu mo dui de nang zhen zi rong ta tang o man ju ba nyen rabu du wa ta
So Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition says, once there is a self, there is an idea of another. So once one grasps at the truly established self, then there is a grasping at this idea of a truly established other. So first one grasps at oneself as being established, and then there's a belief that there's an established other. It says, on behalf of self and other, there is attachment and hostility. Attachment to oneself and hostility towards others, because of this reifying view of the perishing aggregates. So we have this reifying view of the perishing aggregates, so this attachment to one occurs because of it, this grasping at a truly established self, and then hostility is created towards others because of this view. And let's see, all of the faults come about in association with these. So it's very similar to the quote that right when we get back from break I'll have, which is from Chandrakirti's commentary on the Mulya Madhyamika Karika, which is called Entrance to the Middle Way. Gola. Ngatsu de jutsu jiba ni ratu. So Rinpoche said at the beginning, also there's a quote, and I said that if we just take a short break, we can hand out things, and then I'll find the quote. So just take a break. So in Chandrakirti's entrance to the Middle Way, we find a quote that's very similar to the quote that we find in the Lamrim Chenmo, Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition. So the quote is, "Perceiving that all faults and all afflictions flow from the idea of the transitory composite, or the view of the transitory collection, and knowing that its focus is the very self, this self is what the yogi will disprove." From this view of the perishing aggregates comes attachment, comes anger, comes all of these other negativities. And then if we look at the beginning of the Chandrakirti's text, we find another similar point that's made. So we find the beings think I at first and cling to self. They think of mine and are attached to things. They thus turn helplessly as buckets on a water wheel, and to compassion for such beings I bow down. So we have this idea that first there's this reifying view of the perishing aggregates, and there's an establishment of a truly established self, and then this establishment of other, attachment to oneself, hostility towards others. And then if we look right to the sutras, we find in the Four Noble Truths teaching, this isn't in Tibetan on tape, but at the break Rinpoche taught this, so we find the Four Noble Truths teaching, but this is the superior truth of suffering. So the explanation of suffering, this is the superior truth of origin, this is the superior truth of cessation, this is the superior truth of path. And with origin, when we look to what is the root of cyclic existence, we find it's the grasping at true establishment. It's really this reifying view of the perishing aggregates that is the root of cyclic existence. And the categories of origin of suffering are karma and the afflictions. But if we look at the afflictions themselves, which are the real primary, they have at their root, at their starting point, this grasping. So we find it in the sutra, we find it in the Madhyamika teaching by Chandrakirti, and then also in Dharmakirti's commentary on the Compendium of Valid Cognition, where it says, once there is a self, there is an idea of another. On behalf of self and other, there is attachment and hostility. All the faults come about in association with these. So all of our negativities, our attachment, our hostility, our pride, etc., come about from this mistaken idea of self and other, and their true establishment. So that's the order in which the afflictions arise.
Bachala tene nyomu che ngores pala nye tos ne meba ne nyomu ba chewa ta jesu tumbi yun hos tene do sha de jesu tumbi yidon wan ton la tene do sha chegro nyomu ta jesu tumbi yun hon la tene nyomu ta che ngores meba do de nyomu ju she tan teres meba je tene dozine cheba tamba maybe trunga be just lobo cheba tamba maybe trunga ba ngabe just lo na what the nyomo che age kesha tene mo be ba ina what nyomo be jure tela de nyomo che ngores sheba ne chulo ba sheba ina o nyomo che age chu tene shia yoro chulo ba sheba os tela de nyomo che ngores komba ne nyomo ba debe to jeba was komba sa to what the chewa toma ma ban ta ti ba to ngazo do sha kondo nyomo bal radio ro komba cheba radio ro kombi to le ane nyomo ba che ungore komba de ju jeba la tene nyomo che ungore ne ila sheba ne and do Mudu Tama, Brudu Badan, Mataba, Taban Zimba. Taban Zimba, Sumi Yedos, Chujima, Chaji Bomba Maida, Union Yawana, Chujima Yele, Yomujun Tawai, what the Rabadua?
They alone got.
Chaji Bomba Maida, Yomu, Chujima Yele, Yomujun Tawai, really what the Yomobi, Judro Sun Sun.
Less so. Okay. So, Rinpoche said it'd be good to go through the 6 causes again, also. So, we begin the causes of the afflictions. These are the 6-fold as presented in the Bodhisattva levels. Number 1 is basis, refers to the latent proclivity for affliction. So one has to have the imprint of an affliction in order for it to arise. So that's the first cause. The second is the object, refers to the appearance of objects conducive to the arising of an affliction. So there, for instance, for the arisal of attachment to take place, there has to be an attractive object there. So in order for the afflictions to arise, there have to be an object that's conducive to their arisal present. Number 3, social context refers to the influence of bad friends and foolish people, so socializing with bad people. Number 4, explanation refers to listening to wrong teachings. Number 5, habituation refers to the process of becoming accustomed to the past afflictions. So since beginningless time, we've become more and more familiar. We've become familiar. Since beginningless time, we've become familiar with various afflictions. So if we have this familiarization, then the affliction can arise. So if we have this habituation, this familiarization, if we've thought about it a lot, or familiarized ourselves with it a lot, then it will arise. So habituation is number 5. Number 6 is attention. It refers to incorrect attention that projects pleasantness onto what is unpleasant in character, conceives an impermanent thing to be permanent, and the like. The 4 erroneous conceptions that mistakenly consider things that are actually permanent, painful, and pure, and lacking a self to be permanent, pleasant, pure, and possessing a self. So number 6 is really this improper mental conduct, improper mental engagement. And in the Abhidharma text, it states that there are 3 things necessary in order for the arisal of an affliction to take place. So it says that if there has not been prior abandonment, and the object is close, and improper mental conduct takes place, only then can an affliction arise. Only then can an affliction arise. So this is from the Abhidharma Kosha. Digsum Rinpoche.
Da nyomo ba jeda ji rinpa de chaje da nyomo bi nyemi mar bi nyemi. Jigno ne.
Okay.
Nyomo bi nyemi lendro.
Lesser.
Da nyomo bi nyemi tenma da segdo da nyomo jewana. Nyomo jewana tambo sen gune nyomo ba sheba da. Mebala shinji lo de sheba dans. Mebala shinju de sheba dans. Pala ne temba sheba dans. Ane retunji nyomo ju me sheba sheba. Retunji nyomo ju me sheba shebas. Retun nyomo ju me sheba shebas. Tande ne masaji son re do nyemi de son. Do de jene shebi nyomo bi nyemi. Do de jene shebi nyomo bi nyemi de la. And Jeremy Reshe Mobi Son Shabatella, Janji Saji Dombuder, Saji Dombuder is Saji Dombuder, do the Jenge, Nyomo be Yemi de la, Jeremy Reshe Son Shabate, Janji Saji Dombuche, Shudu Son Shabe, Nyomo be Yemi de Jeremy Reshe Son Batella, and Janji Saji Nebache. One the Saji Somba de Kadamaki Gomba Omarbe. Gomba yu shunju dang do de jenyi kan song jabe nyemi di kasukure nyangsu labi chu wo del reshe de la nyangji song ba dres saji song ji ge duwa tambu to do the jang to he je neba shunju nyomobi nyeme reshi de neba che somba de kadang gishin gomba yu nendo de jang da shunju ne shebi nyomobi nyeme ne nyasu nyeme san ne nganyu samba la suba o de nyasu na be chude 사지 송지는 어디 고지식으로
So the fourth category is the faults of the afflictions. This when we look at Jayan Sheba's commentary, look at the outline, it says there are three categories. First category is the faults of the afflictions according to Dodogen, the Mahayana Sutra Alankara, the ornament for the Mahayana Sutras. So that's the first category. The second category is faults as described in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life, or engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds. And then the third category is the faults as of the afflictions as explained by Gombawa. And Gombawa just summarizes and speaks of what Shantideva has presented and Maitreya has presented. So when we look at Gombawa's section, he refers back to those texts. So these are the three categories that Jayan Sheba says are part of number 4.
What? 다 담부도 제네 송샤비 녜미 동고 데네 조도와 녜미네 뇽모바 제와 뇽모바 담부 제와나 꾸네 뇽모바 셰바다 생꾸네 뇽바 셰레지 산조 메발라 신줄로도 셰바다 메발라 신줄로도 셰바 뇽모바도 제온도 타바 드마야발라 드은제로 나진 네 유디 신줄로도 제가데스 대인소도 뇽모라 로셰이 차스 Rangi Joyu la Trui Riba Imi Chao Sana Hoten Disarwa.
Gari Imi Chap?
Loshe. Rangi Joyu la Trui Riba Loshe Xenya Mariba. Lode Dun None, Monson Jeba, Tujo Ishe, Nhala Mang Loshe, Dun Yo Mariba Loshe Dun. Dun None, Dunba Loshe, Nyomoyina Dunba Loshe.
Nyomoyina Loshe Imi Chap.
Chao Sonde Tenga
Chap, okay.
Okay.
So we'll read a little of this. When an affliction arises, so first we're going to look at the points made according to the ornament from Mahayana Sutras. When an affliction arises, at first it completely afflicts your mind, causing you to err with regard to what you are observing. So there's a mistaken view with regard to the object of observation, a wrong view, reinforcing your latent proclivities and causing the same sort of affliction to reoccur. So just as there's an error that takes place when you misapprehend a rope, you think that it's a snake, there's an error that's taking place here when the affliction arises in your mind stream, and when you become afflicted mentally by it. So if it is an affliction, it is necessarily wrong view. So when we look at the Lorig, or the mind and awareness teachings, we have 7 types of consciousness. We have direct valid cognition, or direct prime cognition. We have inferential valid cognition. We have correctly assuming consciousness. We have a consciousness where the object appears but is not ascertained. We have immediately preceding condition. We have doubting consciousness, and then we have wrong view, or would sometimes translated as mistaken consciousness. So these are the 7 types of consciousness. Actually, it's called subsequent cognizer. I said immediately preceding condition, but those are called subsequent cognizers. So it's direct valid cognition, inferential valid cognition, subsequent cognizer, correctly assuming consciousness, awareness to which the objects appear but are not ascertained, doubt, and then wrong view. Or wrong consciousness is probably the most accurate translation. So wrong consciousness, if it's an affliction, it's necessarily a wrong consciousness. So that's why it causes this error in with regards to the object of observation, because it's this wrong consciousness has permeated your, I think that's the best way to translate, or saturated your mental continuum at that point, your mind at that point, causing it to be at an error, to apprehend in a way that's an error, or misapprehend.
통화 매번 녀모 바샤 요요바레 단다 녀모 도서게 바샤 모부자네 녀모 바샤 템부즈군두스 템버셰바다 리튼지 녀모 주메셰바셰바스 아니 녀모 바샤 템부 요자 아니 워데 뇌차가 바샤를 때네 리튼 바샤 모부체 용거래 네 뇌차 모부체 용거래 네 콩주 바샤를 때네 리튼 콩주 모부체 용거래 나제 바샤를 때네 리튼 나제 모부체 용거래 what 리튼 주메셰바셰바스 what 바지 주잖아.
So what happens is when you have this arisal of attachment, it actually reinforces the imprints that are already there of attachment. So it reinforces them, and then in the future causes the same sort of affliction to reoccur. So the same sort is important, that it's concordant. So when we have this emergence of this attachment or hatred, then what it reinforces and then causes to occur is concordant with it. So it's of the same type, of the same sort. So let me make sure I got. Dixon.
This one. What didn't my then this one do is that rather than you but the run no no but Sendata Shemanikala, Kanamato Jebadans, Sendela Kanamato Jigre, Jiva Shemalaya Kanamato Jigres, Kanamato was Rajiji Kanamato, JB Kanamato Nimarbe, Kanamato Niudro, Rajiji Kanamato, JB Kanamato, Rajiji Kanamato was Nangazo, the Sujabade, Rajiji Kanamato was Sujabade, Chimba Sujana Dibare, Rajungi Sujana Dibarwa, Rajiji Kanamato. What the Chimba the Rajunika ge ne de Gushuna Diba in Hendele, Rajiji Kanamato was. GB Kanamato was there, and the Rajuntul. 네 신주 주고마르사다 어떤 상지 제바요도로 첨부 신준 제바가요 말보다 로존들로 어때 신의 주바이나 되는 어때 지 동아주용으로 제비 카나마토 와스 어때 제 카나마토 와서 어때 서고 카나마토 제바다스 동에다 예메도와 이 동에다 예메 천데도 심할래 동에다 예메도 용거레스
맞아.
네 뇨아다스 지와라 수비 등에 뇨아시바다 지와라 수비 등에 두바시바다스 지와라 퀄리티 지와라라 수비 등에 두바시그레스 네 타발 렌드 쇼그레스 네 와데 뇨모 여자 아니 뇨모 보비 타바 토토고 마로 장 렌드 쇼그레스 와데바 주자나 마라 야
So all of these points that are being made here are again from the ornament for the Mahayana Sutras. So it may harm you, others, or both. So misdeeds cause us and others harm. it leads to misdeeds in this life. So they've chosen this word misdeeds. I guess it can be translated as that. It's the word, though, that there are two categories of, and one category is the general, and the other is specific to individual. So what that means is that there are, for instance, killing is something that is generally a general misdeed. So I guess the word misdeed works. It's just using it again for another word in Tibetan. So the misdeed is kind of pervasive at that point. Killing is always a misdeed. But cutting down a tree, for instance, is not always a misdeed, because a householder doesn't hold a vow to not cut down a tree, whereas an ordained person does hold that vow. So that's a misdeed that is more exclusive to an individual, whereas there are those misdeeds which don't have that exclusivity, that are just generally always misdeeds for anyone who partakes in them. So it will lead to non-virtuous misdeeds in the future, in this life or in future lives or in both. It creates experiences of pain and anguish, as well as sufferings of birth and the like. So the various types of suffering: birth, aging, sickness, and death. It takes you far from nirvana. Takes you far from nirvana. That's where Rinpoche stopped. Dixon.
What that and Gawali Nabashaba, Yamuta, what the Suzu Juliet, Chimbi Dumba, the Rajon Dumba, what the Gawali Nabashigres, and the Lonshu Nabashigres, Lonshu, and then the Sata, the Combat Zulia, Numuya, and the no Gojua. Lonshu Nabatans.
That's so. So your virtue is destroyed. So there you have the virtue of, for instance, householder vows, or if you have ordained status vows, that is destroyed. It says those virtues that you've achieved are destroyed, and your resources are depleted. Your enjoyments, your house, your car, these sorts of things are depleted. Digsun.
Mombo said about Nobayina, and your Moyo can go send Jomba Yungres, Jagres, Jomba dance, Gawada, Majiba Meba, and Gawada Majiba Meba, Gawa Meba, Majiba Mebares, Magawa Yungre, Jiba Yungres, Susanto, Maneba Piwata, Susan good to Maduja as a kitchen machine, and what the Kecha Duja Momochono Grace. Piwa dance. What did you do?
Okay. In society, you feel apprehensive. So when you get around a lot of people, you don't feel good. You don't want to approach. You get overwhelmed, almost like more overwhelmed if you have these afflictions. Joyless and devoid of confidence. So you have no joy. And you have no confidence. So this is a result of the afflictions. So these are more faults of the afflictions. While your notoriety spreads in all directions, so people all over are saying bad things about you, or stating bad things. And excellent persons, those where Rinpoche stopped.
Shajaman Budala Sobe, Sanji Suga Duja Logres, and then Paden Lamas, Soma Suga Duja Logres, Soma Su Tampi Pemba Tibetamba Suke, Madiabo Maris, Mera Tangres, Pemba dance.
That's
what did you shut?
Excellent persons such as teachers and protectors rebuke you. So teachers know that such things as attachment and so forth are bad, so they speak badly of you. and the protectors rebuke you, shun you. So protector here, such as Paul and Lama. Then the Dampa dang suma the garchegadu the chiranducha yin lagadu gar.
Tonba shaja tubala soba to nyamu yokenze yabur logo marota.
Okay.
Nyamu yokenze
Okay. So these beings. Such as, so it says excellent persons such as teachers. So the word here is the word for the teacher. The teacher is Shakyamuni Buddha. So it really should say excellent persons such as the teacher and protectors rebuke them. So the teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, says the afflictions are bad. And those who have afflictions are bad. And the protectors, such as Paul and Lama, say that if you have the afflictions, then that's bad. So it sounds judgmental when I say those who have the afflictions are bad. So if you have the afflictions, it's bad. The Rinpoche, the NGK Yabuzugu, the Suma dan the Dampa, the Nyomon Ken Yapiomare Nyomon Yapiomare.
Nyamu yoken kaza to sanji yabur logo marota. Nyamu yoken.
Yapiomare.
Nyamu yobe kaza dile.
Nyomon Yobi Kansa.
Nyamu la yabu yomar logo. Nyamu yoken de yabu mari logo.
Okay, so I asked Rinpoche for if it was, the afflictions or the person. Rinpoche said the afflictions are bad, so one who possesses them is bad. So that's how he answered that. He said, so yeah, either way. Afflictions are bad, so a possessor of the afflictions is bad.
And then Nyamu yoken de schedule what joba jinishin nagres, jojindo, what an central deba mo sasun joba jinishin shine Naru Jishin, Rangiton to Vos, Joba Jinishin shine, and then Rangiton that two mare. Danda two the beat on that two mares, Dandu two mare, Taba two mare, Sajuku two mares, Matuba was what about what the Dodajang, what they shit him, but
you die with regret, your aims unfulfilled, and after death you are reborn in a miserable realm. So you have regret because you haven't done what you should have. It says your aims unfulfilled, so you are able to create the causes for a higher realm existence. You weren't able to achieve liberation. You weren't able to achieve complete Buddhahood. This is a fault of the afflictions. Your inability to achieve these things is a fault of the afflictions. All of these points are from Maitreya's ornament from Mahayana Sutras. So now we see the actual quote. So there's a lot of points that are made here above the quote, because all of these points are contained within the quote. So if we were asked who says all of these things presented, then we would say Lord Maitreya does in the ornament from Mahayana Sutras.
Sutin Nogres, Chemi Domba the Raju Domba Yama Shegarota, Sutin Jong, and Nyaji Tembe, Meshin, and the Sun Tantejin Tembe Pens, Nyaji Nebe, Pensions, Nagawan Yabala Soba, Nebe Gawan Yabala Soba to Ngalonyamu against the Yores, Things was on, and the Shata to be Abu Marilogre. But then I'm a suma to Yab Megamares, Sundan, the Jin Tembe Pens, Suma Yabu Marilogre, and Tembe Yabu Shada to be Abu Marilogre, Pen. Joba Mene, Pegares, what Pegares, that Joba Mene, Pane, Jento, Makuna suggests, Juba Manis, Damarba, Damat Dujaris, Mayabu Mariko, the kitchen about Chonogro, which of the other end water. Manhattan, Jento Mahones, Joa Shaman, then Nuala Subi Mahunel Genegres, Tudam Matu Nyabes, Susu Tuba de Yan, Tuba de Yan, Matuba de Yan Gres, Go Susu Yoba de Yan, Go Matuba de Tumatuba Jegres, Nyabe, Ila, Dungacham, Ila Dungacham, Shason sauce, what about the Sajidometre? Yeah.
Okay, so the quote from the ornament from Mahayana Sutra says, through afflictions you destroy yourself, destroy other beings, and destroy your ethical discipline. So we harm ourselves, we harm others, or both. It leads to misdeeds. So it destroys your ethical, so comparing it. So destroys your ethical discipline here is referring to those ethics which are general, or those that are specific, those that are, or the vows of a householder, or the vows of an ordained. So it destroys your ethical discipline. After you have ruined your joy, so you have lost you've lost. Let me just ask Rinpoche here. I'm sorry. No, the true cheat. You're a. The long Nietzsche. So caviar. Yomo. Gonga me bachi. Suma. Okay, they rasan do. Dan suma. Do de gen lay. Nyomo.
Nija sonju sudura. Nija sonju sudura. Do de gen lay. Nyomo na je dan jong. Sentient jong. Treatise jongs. What is called Nyomo be. Dal nyogre, gen nyogre. Treatise nyaba shigres. Nyaji nyebes.
Nyanche nyebe.
Nyaji nyebe son du. Ne domba nyaba dan. Ne gawa nyaba to so ngali yin son tan nyebe. Ane jenda ke mera tangre jiba damba jenda ke yabu mari lagre.
Okay, ding chua.
Son tan soma ke mera tangre. Teji tembe phens shaja tobala sube yabu mari lagre se ta.
The nyamche nyebe. The gewa cha.
Nyamu yakente gawa domba la sube tata nyanda gawa nyanda.
Okay, thank you.
Gawa nyaba yin son tan.
Seldu.
Ane wote sanji ke yabu mari lagre, soma ke yabu mari lagre. Mera tangre.
Nyamche nyebe. Okay, so we'll do. After you have ruined your joy, so here this is a loss of your virtues. This ruined your joy. So you've ruined your joy because you've lost your virtue, and virtue causes happiness. So you've ruined your joy. You are shunned, your protectors and teachers rebuke you. So here, again, the teacher, your protectors and the teacher rebuke you, shun you, say that you are bad, say that you are bad. Disreputable. So disreputable here means that notoriety spreads in all directions. People talk badly again. You will be reborn in a leisureless condition. So you will be reborn in the lower realms. You will be reborn in a basis which is freedomless. You suffer great anguish in losing the virtue you had or have yet to attain. Digson. So this is virtue that you have now and virtue that you will obtain in the future. So these are the faults of the afflictions according to the Mahayana Sutra Alamkara, Maitreya's ornament for the Mahayana Sutras. Number 2 is the faults of the afflictions according to engaging in the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life, engaging in the Bodhisattva deeds.
Tada ki daden shes and the Sha control of the combat the Labat and Yo Mare, Pow de K Mares, Mare de Inaya, Yomo to Nasu Yomo, Yuban Chego, the Sha wants to the Sha Gonki, and then as you let come on Jego, control on Lecamon Jego, the Sha to Honduki, Yuban of Res, Chego, the Jin Daden, Jin She. Whatever you na?
Okay. Should you, right? Rinpoche, the Bazang Meyang, the Donagare, Bazang Meyang.
Shedan the Sha control of the Sukalo and Kanla than the Yomares. Panzan Mea, Pow than the Mares, Pow Mea. Gigi tar tada ki da drenjin shes ne bawut ne maride no kusu ngasu ne wade docha yubo ne kondu yubo ngaje yubo na shenu gores
But Basa me they don't
bawu sana karse ngaso bawu sana wade panzan me ase panzan
local Chenmo.
Local chibul bawu chibul lo de marba.
Oh, okay.
Local chibul de maina ya. No ku ngaso
Jumbo Mayan?
local chibul mai bas.
Then Nipa?
Panzan me ya.
Jishi
tar tada ki
Jishi Dardona. Sena?
bawu maina ya.
Ah.
Jiji tar kuju kari shi goresana. Ngaso ko nyomo gi yubu na shi gores.
Okay. Lessa. Okay, Sabudu. So we're going to look now at in the quote from Guide to Bodhisattva's Way of Life, stanza by stanza. Enemies such as...
Jiji tar sa da biji ngaso jide na yubu ta pambu ta yoro ta. Ane ngaso o mama amraga pamburo ti yubu mo yoro. Tenda ba shegres jiji tar ekdambo.
NGK the Natsu the Nyomon local Chenpo Yomari the Jamo Yomare, the Sem Jamo, the Jamo Yomare, Ripa Chenpo Yomare, Sherap Yomare, Yomare be. Intelligent. Intelligent.
Example.
Oh, okay. So we're just looking at this stanza. It says they're neither brave nor intelligent, and the intelligent part I don't find in the Tibetan, unless it's this being, maybe like intelligent, meaning like they're not a person. That would be the only way it could be interpreted within the Tibetan, meaning like not intelligent in the terms of wisdom, but is there intelligence on the planet X? So meaning like person. They're neither brave nor like alive, almost, a person. So it's enemies such as hatred and craving have neither feet nor hands, and are neither brave nor intelligent. How then have they enslaved me? So here, when we become attached to something, it's like being enslaved by that attachment, because then we chase after that thing that we want. So it's like we've come under the enslavement of, we've come under the control of our attachment. So we see the cases where Obama, the Obama, Rinpoche gave an example. Lessa. So Obama's the president, and there's a lot of people under him.
Example, what is?
Oh, okay. People under him who have to do what he says. Likewise, so this enslavement is like those workers. He's almost using the word slaves, like the people who work for the president are enslaved by the president. Because they have to do what he says to do. Likewise, we're enslaved by our afflictions because we have to do what they tell us to do. They take us. They take over our being. So that is what is meant by the first stanza.
gawal nyoba jigre, gangul nyoba jigre, dal nyoba jigres, ne shelas. Tel control tel control malaba zoba jeba te yabo mares.
Why so?
Tela mutu zoba ne mi zoba happiness nyomulo zoba de wote zoba dujares. Mera tansa zoba res. Tela zoba happiness.
Okay, so Rinpoche also said before that it's a lot of work once we become under the control of these afflictions. It's a lot of work for us. And then while they dwell within my mind, they are pleased to do me harm. So they don't try to help us. They don't do anything good for us. They just are there to harm us. They are not to be endured without anger. Tolerance of them is ridiculous. So we shouldn't have patience in relation to these afflictions. We shouldn't tolerate them and say, well, we have patience. We should be angry with them. We should be, we shouldn't, that's it. We should be angry with them. We shouldn't be without anger. We shouldn't have practiced patience with our afflictions. And it's a funny way of translating. It's not saying we shouldn't be patient with ourselves because we have afflictions. It's saying the afflictions themselves we shouldn't be patient with. So I just want to make sure the translation's clear.
Senja kongal tanga tul dalamba yena ngaso nyawal tritu mares nyomo bidrat ke wote ngaso ne tada trena roro jang tawa maruba tada keji jela do so wote nyomo bidrat ngaso wote ri jabar ro sama ne tawa jin lu no gores ngaso nyawal te tri gores te yusu nyomo do gores mongu gores.
Even if all the deities and demigods should rise up as my enemies, they cannot lead me or force me into the fires of unrelenting hell. So the only enemy that can do this is the enemy of our afflictions. External enemies such as cannot do so. But this powerful enemy, the afflictions, cast me in an instant into fires so hot that if they met even Mount Meru, not even ashes would remain. So the enemy of our afflictions has that power.
Pendant Deshina Nyamuna ne Deshina Shijin Dungen Nobrashi Jason Benyamina Sheba Shawosa. That didn't matter Karsure.
You can't sabledu.
Ah.
The Nyomon Toma me Tama Yomare. Tama Ire.
Toma Mebatara. During Tuta Mebatar, during Tuta Mebataras Tuta Messers, that is a Dushaton, Konduton, Dushak Jud Canoe or Joe Haman over Joe Hamin Dushak Jud Tisana, Toma Mebaruta, Tuta, Tomi Tayo Mares, Tuta Mebataras, and Drajan Kunjan, Tetabos, Dradan, near to Toma Mebaris Wager. Da tuma mebare nye tuma meba jajen kun jan tetabo sa yuri tuba mainos jajen kun jan tetabo yuri tuba mainos tumba renro tenshina tanje ane senje to renro tan phamba jeba ina. And the social pentures.
The NGK, the Tuma Mepa, then Tama Mepa.
Tomo Zokoron Tomamatu Omdo, Tota Melas, Durin Tota Mebad.
Urine
Yomul Tama Mesana, Tome Juja Tamata Devas, Yomul Toma Yomares,
Lasso.
in a Tama Yoris.
Tama Yuri.
Yomobu Daju Yomopun.
Indicate Tama Yomare.
Tony Matuna Toma Mesana.
Oh, okay.
Tony Matusan Toma Mesana.
Lasso. Okay. The end. What we were talking about is that it says the enemy that is my afflictions has lasted a long time without beginning or end. And I said that's incorrect. There's an end because there's a way to abandon them. And Rinpoche said absolutely, you're correct that a foe destroyer has abandoned them. But if one hasn't seen emptiness, if there isn't this occurrence of emptiness, then there isn't an end. So we can state that there is no beginning. Be very sure. But when we say there is no end, we have to be careful in understanding because there is an end of the afflictions. No other enemy has the power to last for such a long time. Given appropriate service and attention, everyone helps you and makes you happy. But if you serve your afflictions, they only inflict further suffering. And we're also trying to find the end part in here. So that ends the second section, which is the section of engaging in the Bodhisattva deeds, guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. The Dutsar.
Nyomo la, nyomo be nyemi dan, senyi dan, nyebu dan ji, jutan ji shegu sa. Nyomo bon la, ane lela bon to mare, nyomo bon la, nyomo be nyemi shegu res, nyomo be nyemi, wade nyomo be nyemi tele, ane saje son de marba, nyemi de bon res, ane nyomo be senyi, suju shi senyi dan, suju senyi kanga shegu res. Sanju Majawa Shibi, Shileji, Sanju Yomu Shi Seni, Suzu Seni la Yomu Juro, Oti Nyebo. Tene, and then Yomu be Nyebu Shiku, entered out. Don't need to be Shero La Suba. What the Yomu be Nyebu down. Ji Judan Shigu sauce, Yomu be Nyebu down, and then Yomu Baji, Junyabu Jibi Jutu Galo, Shigu res, the Ganga Don Dua, Shigus. Nyeme sheba shene, jun tas, nyomogi nyeme sheba shene, nyomol jun ta gores. Na drazo, nyomol drazo gore, nyeme mashena, dramaton. Nyomobi nyeme mashena, nyomol drayima kogomares. Nyomobi nyeme di shezon na nyomol drayima kogores. Magui, dode jentan, shuenju ne, sumbatares. Nyomo be nyeme do de jeta shwejo no somba tar ni ja don do samba yin somba ta se kadam bi gi shin kong go de nyalen do na guyos son yores nga cho de na ji go res nyomo ji cheni sheba la yang chunga ba nyen sa nyomo be cheni sheba la chunga ba ngaba gudu da ngaba zo so shegures ta dane mata yang pomunga iraji tu sta gures ta nga so nyomo do de lori tu so de lori ta de pomunga iraji ta to sun chelen ba yiro lori tu so no lo chanyo ta nyen tu so yoro ta lori tu so yoro pomunga iraji tu sun chelen de ane sabo so ta lori de nyo ji de ma so yiro wa to lori tu so yore chanyo to de nyen sho wa de cha control la so chanyo to ane choa kanjin la so nyen sho la so ba mo she ba she ne cha dang la so ba kan ju le che ta na de dan de yang ko shong ngo nya to 네, 뭐좀기 모두 타바이노 세송바다레 고고바이노 so what the international 제고 송된사.
Okay, and then number 3 is how to combine the points made in the ornament from Mahayana Sutras and engaging in the Bodhisattva deeds, the guide to the Bodhisattva's way of life. And this is a Kadampa master, Gombawa. It says, to eliminate afflictions, you must know the affliction's faults. So it's not easy to eliminate afflictions. So you have to know what their faults are. You have to know their characteristics. So characteristics here is referring to definitions. You have to be able to define what an affliction is generally. That is disturbing and is disruptive to the mind and is disturbing in nature when it arises. You have to know what the specific definitions of the afflictions are, those 10 afflictions and their specific definitions, and what the remedies are for each of those afflictions, and the causes for their arising. After you have recognized their faults, regard them as defective and consider them enemies. If you do not recognize their faults, you will not understand that they are enemies. Therefore, it is said that you should reflect on this, following what is said in the ornament from Mahayana Sutras and engaging in the Bodhisattva deeds. And also, study Basu Bandhu and Asanga's text on knowledge as well in order to understand the characteristics of the afflictions. At the least, study Basu Bandhu's explanation of the 5 aggregates. Once you know the root and secondary afflictions, then when attachment, hostility, or such arises in your mind stream, you can identify it, thinking, this is that, now it has arisen, and fight the affliction. So we also can study the 6 root afflictions and the 20 secondary afflictions as presented in the low-rig teachings, so the mind and awareness teachings. And we have that root text, Mind in Tibetan Buddhism, in English, so you can study all those categories and so forth in that. So now we will end. We have the concluding mandala offering and dedication prayer, and thank you everyone for coming. The fundamental ground is scented with incense and strewn with flowers, adorned with Mount Meru, the 4 continents, the sun and the moon. I imagine this as a Buddha land and offer it. May all sentient beings enjoy this pure realm. I dedicate whatever virtues I have collected for the benefit of the teachings and of all sentient beings, and in particular for the essential teachings of Venerable Losang Drapa to shine forever. I send forth this jeweled mandala to you, precious Guru. I dedicate all this virtue to emulate the knowledge of the hero Manjushri and likewise Samantabhadra as well, with whatever dedication is praised as supreme by all the conquerors who traverse the 3 times. I also dedicate all my roots of virtue for the sake of auspicious deeds. In that pure land surrounded by snowy mountains, you are the source of all benefit and happiness, all-powerful Avalokiteshvara Tenzin Gyatso. May you stay until samsara's end. I pray for the long life of the precious Khensur Wandak, upholder of scriptural and realizational doctrines, spiritual friend who trained extensively in the 5 great philosophical texts, exceptional wisdom and perseverance. Tuji Rinpoche Gutsi Shapi Denronang, Chenmo Kanga Denronang.